What would you do if your parents told you your life only existed to save someone else's? For me, that someone was my sister. And when I said no, they tried to erase me completely. My name is Hazel, and the worst day of my life didn't start with a fight. It started with silence. I was standing in the middle of the hospital lobby, clutching a stack of papers that were supposed to prove one thing: that I could help my sister, Aria. That I could save her. But before I could even breathe, my mother, Abigail, ripped those papers straight out of my hands and tore them into shreds. Her voice rang across the lobby like a siren. "You're letting your sister die, Hazel. How could you be so selfish?" Every head turned. A nurse froze mid-step. A man holding a coffee stared at me like I was some kind of monster. My chest burned, but I couldn't even speak, because standing right beside her was my father, Merrick, and he said the words that still echo in my bones. "You're just a selfish mistake." He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He said it calmly, like it was a fact. Like my existence had been a clerical error the world should have fixed long ago. I remember crouching down, my fingers shaking as I tried to gather the shredded papers off the floor. I wasn't doing it because I wanted to defend myself. I was doing it because I needed proof. Proof that I hadn't imagined this moment. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Behind the glass doors, I saw Aria lying in her hospital bed, pale and weak, but her eyes weren't desperate. They were sharp, calculating. She had spent years perfecting the art of playing victim, and right now she was winning again. My mother leaned down, her perfume choking me, and hissed, "You were always ungrateful, cold. We should have never kept you." I looked up at her, my voice low but steady. "You only gave me what you expected in return." For a second, just a second, her mask slipped. Then she screamed again, louder this time, for the audience gathering around us. The whole lobby was watching. And in that moment, I realized something. My family wasn't just trying to use me. They were trying to erase me. I walked out of that hospital, the shredded papers stuffed into my bag, and for the first time in years, I wasn't planning to stay quiet. Inside, my mother was probably still crying for her audience, my father still pretending to be calm and reasonable, and my sister, Aria, still watching like a queen who had already won. My phone buzzed in my lap, screen lighting up over and over again. "Mom, come back inside. Stop this act. Your sister is dying." "Dad, think about what you're doing, Hazel. This will haunt you forever." Every message felt less like love and more like a chain being tightened around my neck. I was about to silence the phone when a new notification slid across the screen. Email. From Olivia Johns. Subject. "I think you might need this." For a moment, I froze. Olivia. It had been 13 years since we'd last spoken. In high school, she had been the only person who didn't look away. She was the only one who noticed the bruises, the missing days, the way I flinched when someone raised their voice. While everyone else called me dramatic or unstable, Olivia had seen the truth. My finger trembled as I opened the email. Inside were 3 attachments. 3 ghosts from a past I thought I had buried. The first was a Polaroid photo. Grainy, poorly lit, but clear enough. My ribs, swollen and purple, the bruise spreading like spilled ink. In the corner, written in Olivia's handwriting, May 16th, 2009. The second was a note, hurried and messy, but definitely hers. "Hazel, after the stairs, I heard the scream. I saw the fall. Don't let them say you made it up." My breath hitched. I remembered that day. The staircase, the push, the denial. My parents had said I slipped. Aria had laughed when I limped back into my room. Nobody believed me, except Olivia. The third attachment broke me open. It was a scrap of paper in my own handwriting, shaky and uneven. "If something happens again and I'm not at school, please tell Miss Mary." I can't do it myself. I had forgotten writing that. I must have been 14, maybe 15. My hands shook as I touched the screen, tracing the words like they belonged to someone else. Tears blurred my vision, but not from sadness, from fury. For years, my parents, Abigail and Merrick, had told the world I was unstable, emotional, too fragile to be believed. They used that story to erase my voice every single time I tried to speak. But here it was, proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I wasn't dramatic. Proof that what I had lived through was real. I leaned back against the bench, phone clutched tight in my hand. For the first time in years, I felt something sharp cut through the numbness. Hope. If Olivia had kept these receipts for 13 years, it meant she had never stopped believing me, and if she still believed, maybe the rest of the world finally could too. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and looked back at the hospital doors. Inside, Abigail thought she had won. She thought the lobby scene had destroyed me, silenced me once and for all. She had no idea. What she didn't know was that the same girl she called a selfish mistake had just been handed the kind of evidence that could burn her entire performance to the ground, and I was ready to strike the match. The next morning, I went back to the hospital. Not because I wanted to help them, not because I felt guilty. I went back because I wanted the truth in black and white. When I walked into Dr. Junior Hooks's office, he looked at me like he had been expecting this moment. His desk was lined with files, papers clipped neatly, emails printed out with timestamps. He motioned for me to sit. "Hazel," he began, his voice steady but heavy. "You deserve to see this for yourself." He slid a document across the table. At the top, bold letters read, "National Donor Registry, Compatibility Results." My eyes scanned the page, heart hammering in my chest. The results were clear. I was not a match for Arya. For weeks, my mother had screamed in my face, telling the world I was letting my sister die. For weeks, my father had called me a mistake for saying no. For years, Arya had looked at me like I owed her my existence. And yet the science, cold, impartial, undeniable, said I could never have saved her in the first place. I sat frozen as Dr. Hooks continued. "This result came in 3 months ago. The registry notified your family. In fact," he turned his screen toward me, "your mother, Abigail, signed the confirmation as your emergency contact. She knew. She had these results before you ever walked into that lobby. Abigail had known all along. She didn't just lie. She weaponized the lie. She tore up my papers, called me selfish, humiliated me in front of strangers, all while holding proof in her hands that I was never the solution to begin with." Dr. Hooks leaned forward, his tone firmer now. "There's something else." He pulled out another sheet, a copy of a medical consent form, signed in my name. My signature, or at least something that looked like it. But the date, the handwriting, the shakiness of the letters, it wasn't mine. It was forged. Abigail hadn't just lied. She had tried to take my choice away entirely. For a moment, the room spun. Not only had my family called me a mistake, they had tried to turn me into nothing more than a body, a tool, a piece of flesh to use and discard. But this time, I wasn't powerless. Dr. Hooks handed me a manila folder filled with printed copies, registry results, timestamps, notarized confirmations. "Take these," he said quietly. "You'll need them." As I clutched the folder, a fire lit inside me. Abigail thought she could write me out of the story. She thought she could bury the truth with tears and theatrics, but I had the proof now, and I wasn't about to let her win. I knew Abigail wouldn't stop at lies whispered in living rooms. She wanted a stage. And of course she built one, a fundraising gala in Arya's honor. Banners, candles, a catered dinner, the works. Posters with Arya's face plastered across town, Abigail's name printed in gold at the bottom. The message was clear. Abigail wasn't just a mother. She was a savior, but I had a folder full of evidence that said otherwise. Laura helped me get ready. She sat me down in her apartment, zipped me into a simple black dress, and said, "You don't need sequins to shine, Hazel. The truth is enough." When I walked into the venue, the room buzzed with the smell of expensive food and the sound of glass clinking against glass. Everyone looked polished, laughing, clapping each other on the back. And at the center of it all, Abigail. She floated between tables, her hand brushing shoulders, her laugh perfectly timed. She wore soft gray silk, just somber enough to say grieving mother, but expensive enough to whisper still important. Merrick trailed behind her, silent as ever, a glass of wine in his hand. And Arya, fragile, pale, draped in a white shawl, sat on a cushioned chair, basking in sympathy like it was sunlight. Every whisper circled around her. So brave, so strong, poor girl. When Abigail saw me, her smile faltered for half a second. Just half. Then she pasted it back on and raised her glass, pretending I was invisible. Not for long. After dinner, Abigail took the stage. The lights dimmed, a hush spread through the crowd. She clutched the microphone like it was her cross to bear. "My family," she began, her voice trembling just right, "has faced unthinkable trials. My sweet Arya," she paused, gesturing to her, "has suffered more than anyone should. But through it all, we remain strong. We remain united," the audience murmured, nodding. Some dabbed their eyes, and then she dropped it. "But unity is hard when some falter." when some refused to step up. Her gaze slid to me like a knife. Gasps rippled through the hall. Whispers. Every eye turned toward me. That was my cue. I rose from my seat, folder in hand, and walked slowly to the stage. My heels clicked against the polished floor. Every step felt like thunder. When I climbed onto the stage, Abigail's smile cracked. "Funny you mention faltering," I said into the mic, "because I think the real faltering here is yours, Mother." I opened the folder, my hands steady. This, I held up the first sheet, is the official donor registry. Dated months ago. It clearly states I was never a match for Arya. Never. Gasps again. Whispers turned sharper. Phones came out recording. Abigail's face went pale. That's not... She stammered, reaching for the papers. I pulled back. And this... I flipped to the forged consent form. Is worse. Someone tried to sign away my body without my permission. Recognize the handwriting? The audience leaned in. Some muttered, "Forgery? Did she just say forgery?" I turned, letting the crowd see the document. Abigail knew I couldn't save Arya, but instead of telling the truth, she built a lie. She made me the villain so she could keep being the hero. She forged my name. She lied to every single person in this room. Murmurs, shouts, chairs scraping back, phones flashing. Abigail lunged for the mic, voice shrill now. "That's a lie? She's confused." She's bitter. But the calm grieving mask was gone. Her face twisted, her voice cracked, desperation dripping off every word. And that was the version of her the world had never seen. Donors shook their heads, muttering. One man in the front row stood up and said, "I gave $5,000 to this cause." Was that built on lies too? Others followed. "I trusted her." She played us. Even Merrick lowered his head, refusing to look at her. Arya's smugness curdled into shock, her lips parting as the room turned against them. Laura, bless her, stood in the back, recording everything. Proof preserved. I looked Abigail dead in the eye. "For years you called me a mistake. But tonight, everyone gets to see who the real mistake is." And then I stepped off the stage, leaving her drowning in the very storm she created. The night of the gala felt like a storm had ripped through my life. But what came after? That was the real earthquake. By sunrise, Abigail's name was everywhere, but not the way she wanted. Clips of me holding up the documents were plastered across TikTok, Twitter, and local news. Headlines read, "Daughter blamed for sister's illness reveals shocking forgery. Mother built charity on a lie." The perfect family was never perfect. Some people were furious on my behalf. How could a mother do this to her own kid? Others admitted they'd believed Abigail's story and felt betrayed. I donated because I thought Hazel was selfish. Turns out Abigail was the liar. By the second day, donations to Abigail's fund dried up. Sponsors pulled out. Her phone, once buzzing with sympathy, now rang with angry questions. And for the first time, Abigail had no script. Merrick and Arya. Merrick tried to play peacemaker. He called me, left a long voicemail filled with broken sentences. "Hazel, I didn't know. I should have... I'm sorry. Your mother. She..." But his silence for all those years echoed louder than his apology now. He had stood by while Abigail crushed me under her lies. He had let her shred my voice, just to keep peace in his house, and peacekeepers aren't innocent. They're accomplices, so I never called him back. Arya? She wasn't sorry either. She texted me, "You've ruined everything. I hope you're happy." I stared at her words, then deleted them without answering. Because Arya still believed the world revolved around her, even when the truth was screaming in her face. She didn't want a sister. She wanted a scapegoat, and I refused to play that role ever again. Public humiliation wasn't enough. Abigail was too slippery. I knew she'd try to paint herself as the victim again. So, I walked into a law office with my folder and said, "I want to press charges." The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman with a voice like steel, looked over the donor results and the forged signature. When she glanced back at me, her expression was fierce. "Hazel, this isn't just emotional abuse. This is fraud. This is forgery. You have a strong case. Filing the case wasn't easy." Abigail fought back with everything she had. Crocodile tears, fake apologies, even the classic, "I was just desperate as a mother." But evidence doesn't cry. Evidence doesn't lie. Every court session peeled back her mask layer by layer. The forged form was undeniable. The registry results proved she lied about me from the beginning. Her lawyer tried to argue she was confused, that she was acting out of love, but the judge wasn't buying it, and neither was the public. Abigail's empire crumbled piece by piece. The church group she led asked her to step down. Local charities removed her name from their boards. Parents whispered at school events, avoiding her in the parking lot. And the gala donors, the ones she had charmed for years, filed their own complaints against her. Even Miss Mary, her oldest ally, released a statement. There is no excuse for deceit. Abigail betrayed this community's trust. The woman who once commanded rooms with a smile now couldn't even walk into a grocery store without whispers chasing her down the aisles. She had always said I was her mistake, but in the end, her downfall was entirely her own. My healing is for me? For the first time, I wasn't surviving in her shadow. I started therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I deserved to heal. I filled my new apartment with plants, real ones, not the plastic kind Abigail liked to display. I painted the walls my favorite sage green, and for once, I didn't ask anyone's permission. I cut contact with Abigail, Merrick, and Aria. At first, it felt like cutting off oxygen. But slowly, it felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. One evening, I came home to find a bouquet of lilies on my doorstep. No note, but I knew it was from Laura Mai. She had been my anchor through everything. She recorded the gala, stood beside me in court, reminded me I wasn't crazy when the world tried to gaslight me. I placed the flowers on my table, sat down, and smiled. A real smile. Not the forced ones I used to wear. For years, Abigail called me a mistake. But looking back now, I wasn't her mistake. I was her undoing. Her empire was built on lies. And I was the storm that tore it all down. And as I stood in my own apartment, surrounded by the life I had chosen for myself, I realized something. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't broken. I wasn't a mistake. I was free. So yeah, my mother thought she could erase me, rewrite my story, and turn me into her villain. But the truth came out, and it burned everything she built. And me? I didn't just survive her. I became the one thing she could never control. The storm.